Hey, this is Bryce and welcome back to my YouTube channel, Jacket Trades. In this video, we're doing a part 1 to the build series for the RC10CC. We started building this, we got about this far in a day. We'll probably break the build series down into 3 videos where we do the first video on the chassis. The second video will be the shocks, the miscellaneous chassis bits, and the wheels. And then the third video will be painting the body. And then we'll have a runner. I'm really looking forward to getting this out. It's been a lot of fun building this thus far. I did get a hold of Team Associated about the damaged body and some of the parts having the voids or air bubbles in them. They actually were pretty responsive. Within a day of contacting them, they have shipped a new body out to me. As far as the voids or air bubbles in the parts, they said that's common for injection molded parts, which makes sense. So there's not really going to be any chance of getting a hold of some spares in that regards. I was trying, but they said no. There are a couple of discrepancies in the instructions manual as far as when, where, and how many washers to use throughout the build. It's not really a big deal. You can work through it, but I do make a note of it throughout the video, so pay attention to that. Other than that, no major issues. I did on the steering. They don't have nuts, jam nuts, to kind of reinforce these long screws that are used as the bell crank pivots. But I highly recommend you get some 832 screws to reinforce those pivots. Otherwise, those screws are going to be pretty floppy, especially if you're going to run your car. If it's just going to be a shelf queen, then you should be fine. But I have built this up as a runner. I'm keeping it mostly stock with the exception of reinforcing those bell crank pivots and including a ball race kit for it. Other than that, it will be bone stock. As far as electronics go, I think I'm going to run a brushless motor of some sort with a Hobby Wing ESC, 2S LiPo, and just some inexpensive steering servo. Other than that, it's a pretty straightforward build. Without further ado, I'll go ahead and flip the camera around and we can get into the build. Thanks for tuning in and watching. Take care. Alright, let's get going on the build. Chassis. And we got bag A. This is my first new in-box RC10 I've ever built. So this is step 1. So make sure that this is lined up. The body pin holes parallel or transverse to the body. Some thread lock on these screws. You do want to be careful how tight you torque these screws because there's not a lot of thread engagement. Alright, so that's step 1 finished. Moving on to step 2. Alright, so step 1, I want to make some corrections. They show 4 washers here, but there's only 2 that get used. And then they are threading an 832 screw into 72 thousandths of material, which means you're only getting about 2 threads of engagement. Usually you want 1 to 1.5 diameter engagement, and so we're getting half, not even close to 1. I can feel that this screw here is stripped out just from tightening it. So instead of, because the turnbuckles just kind of sit on here with washers spacing them, or maybe it goes this way, but anyways, there's nothing that really clamps this screw tight, and so what I'm going to do is I'm going to replace these washers with a jam nut, essentially a thin nut, if I can find one in my stuff. These washers are 63 thou thick. I'm going to put some nuts on that are 128, so we're not perfect, but it's better than having these things loose. if I was building this as kind of a daily driver, I would replace these with ball bearing bell cranks. But again, I want it to be as stock as possible, but I'm not going to sit there and let this screw flop around because it sits stripped in the hole. So I'm putting these nuts on to reinforce these pivots, these bell crank pivots. So even though this nut is taller, we still get into the nylon part of this nylock nut, so we can. So what I do with these to make sure they're loose enough is you tighten it down to where it doesn't move, and then you back off until it kind of falls. So let's put it up like that, and you just back off until it falls, like that. So there, you know you're loose, but you're not too loose, right? And that concludes step 2. This is bag B, step 1. One interesting thing to note is this is silver anodized. It's not clear anodized, it's not even raw aluminum, but it's silver anodized, which gives it a nice satin look to it. That's bag B, step 1. So now we will get into bag B, step 2. So we're gonna have to keep an eye on this because I'm telling you, we're gonna trim this corner off. The steering block hits the that corner of the arm when your suspension is compressed. That's bag B, step 2. Now we move on to bag B, step 3 with the front shock tower. That completes bag B, step 3. Now we move on to bag B, step 4 with the arms. So we got bag B, step 4. Now we move on to the gearbox for transmission, where we get to bag C, step 1. Alright, so this E-clip has a bow to it, and you want it to basically be convex, where it bows out with respect to the plates. You can kind of see there. That's bowed out. So I custom ground these for working on the old shocks, the original bottom load shocks on the RC10s. Alright, so I'm kind of jumping ahead here without going through the steps. So we completed bag C step 1 here, that assembly. And then we completed bag C step 2 here with this guy in the E-clip. Now we just completed bag C step 3 with these out drives, or drive axles. And now we're going to assemble it to the shaft. Okay, so those are smooth, and that concludes bag C step 3. So there's bag C step 4. There's our assembly. That completes step 4. Now I move on to bag C step 5. That is bag C step 5. Moving on to bag C step 6, we're going to assemble the spur gear. That's step 6. Moving on to step 7. So this shaft has a flat on it, or 2 flats really. It's D-shaped. So when you make sure that this slides in appropriately. Don't force it and don't try to screw it on. It just slides on like that. So you want to tighten this until the spring is fully compressed, and you back off until the nut is flush with the outside edge of that shaft. Like so. And actually that, to me, is a little loose. Yeah, I would go flush and maybe go on a half turn. But that concludes step 7. Moving on to bag C step 8. Alright, so this wraps up bag C step 9. So we're going to finish up the gearbox with bag C step 10. And there we have our finished transmission. Pretty cool looking. There we go. Alright, so now we're going to move into bag D, step 1, rear shock tower. Interesting. So here's another mistake. So I was putting washers on as we did on the front shock tower, but they don't show washers here. They don't call out washers. But if you go down to this image here, you can see that there's washers on those nuts, and there's obviously washers in the bag. I guess they could get used. Let's see, how many washers do they give us? Oh, never mind. So, why do we have a washer here? And why do we put washers on the front shock towers but not the rear shock towers? I am going to leave the washers on just to be consistent with the front, and then I'm going to get some washers, additional washers for the rear brace, because they don't give us enough washers. So that completes bag D step 1. So now in bag D step 2, we're going to mount the shock tower to the rear bulkhead and the rear bulkhead to the chassis. Before I mount this to here, I'm going to go ahead and break the edge on my chassis because I haven't done that yet. So I'm using this little emery board and just knocking that down so it's soft. So that's a huge difference. Alright, so that is the end of bag D step 2. Now we move on to bag D step 3. Alright, so that is bag D step 3. Now we move on to bag D step 4. So that's interesting. They use a flathead screw and there's no countersink in this plate. I'm gonna go ahead and throw in a countersink real quick, just for fun. Manual, they talk about pressing in the wing tubes, but my kit came with the wing tubes already installed. So this concludes bag D step 4. It is coming along very nicely. Alright, so we are going to move on to bag E step 1, rear suspension arms. So you're supposed to use the forward holes when you mount these. Alright, so we are done with bag E step 1. Now we move on to bag E step 2. Alright, so that wraps up bag E step 2. Now we move on to bag E step 3. Alright, so that completes bag E step 3. Now we move on to bag F step 1. Ooh. Alright, so that concludes bag F step 1. So moving on to bag F step 2, we're going to do the linkages for the front. Alright, so that is bag F step 2. Now we move on to bag F step 3. All right, so that's bag F step 3. Now we move on to bag F step 4. All right, so there we are. We are done with bag F, step 4. So next we're gonna get into the shocks, but we're gonna do that in our next video. So this is a good stopping point for this video. So what do we have left in this build? So we got the shocks, as we get into bag G. And then we get into some more chassis bits, installing the radio gear. Then we got the gear cover, motor, electronics, and wheels, and then painting the body. So it's been a fun build so far. Thanks for hanging into the end. Yeah, I'm having a lot of fun building this. This is my first new in-box RC10 I've ever built. So it's not new to me, but it is new to me. if you get what I'm saying. It's a cool kit. You know, there's a couple of issues with the instructions not being accurate, but otherwise I haven't really hit any major snags in the build. No broken pieces, no lost parts, knock on wood. Yeah, it's coming out really great. I like it. So thanks for tuning and watching. Take care. Bye.